Welcome to Ike Comics Draw Process. I'm drawing page 44 of episode 2 of my comic, First Sun and Sword. Okay, so this page took me longer. It's going to be a little bit faster, maybe 5 hours in total. And there's a few reasons for that. It was broken up into at least 2 drawing sessions, which always slows me down a bit. There's more detail and complex, situations with multiple characters, camera angles with certain backgrounds and perspective. But I also listened to an audiobook that required a lot of attention. It had to do with things I'm trying to learn in regards to my day job and really a passion of mine, counseling. And I learned that lesson again. Sometimes I have to double back and learn the lesson again, that I can't be listening to stuff when I'm drawing. Sometimes music, but even that is pushing the limit. This needs my entire attention. And I thought that I could get away with listening to something while I did it. I thought maybe I'm better now. Maybe that's not really true. But reality is the best mother, as they say. This is where, we should be paying attention to reality. And the reality is this took longer and it was more cumbersome than usual. And I think I also learned less. Like there's so much that happens, like in a conversation with your partner or something. So much is occurring, even pre-thought, fast as light. And that is happening when you're drawing too. There's so much happening in your mind as you're picturing this story play out and what it means for these characters and their emotions and your reaction to that and how you're positioning their bodies in space. Like for me, this is all very alive. And it's more alive when I am more focused on it, when I am paying attention. And when the drawing of pages gets boring, it's because I'm not present. I'm not present for it. It should be enjoyable. Now, that's for me. If I had to do this every single day, there might be a different kind of compromise I would make, in which I need to be able to enter a flow state and not think too much about it in order to do it 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week, unfortunately, for many full-time artists. That would be a different, scenario. In my scenario, it is my practice that I return to with full focus. And I betrayed that this week. And I'm suffering, the consequences of that. Luckily, I can course correct. I don't need to spend a long time stuck here. I can learn from this and remind myself of my basic principles, of what I'm doing. What is my practice? How do I break that down into very simple statements, which I should do sometime. I still, haven't actually written that out, but it's something I'm always learning too. And I learned, I should be not doing other things. I should not be listening to something else. I should just be with the art, with the story. I'm not going to comment much on the penciling at this stage because it is hard to see and it's happening so quickly. These are the roughs. But I will say what's happening is we see Farah running very dynamically, an angle that's looking up at her. And then we see Sun running at the same time towards they have different goals in mind. He's running towards these 2 soldiers to attack them. And we're going to see their 2 spears pointed at him. And in that same panel. And then in the next panel, the last one here, the well is the bottom curve. You've got the 2 figures and him right in front of them, charging at them, being just missing their spears as they thrust them. I chose that angle intentionally. I liked, bringing everything down to the bottom right, and having sun on, coming down at that angle towards them. He's bringing them down towards the well. They're going to fall in it. So then we're going to see him fall into the well, them fall in the well as he jumps and stands on the rim of it. And then an establishing shot that shows everybody. It shows Farah rushing to Sword's aid and Sun looking back at them. I am not intentionally being super dynamic with these drawings. It is just how I'm naturally doing it. So I don't know what that means, like increased drawing skill over time. And perhaps I've been drawing in a more constructive way. I go with a gesture and then I build out the musculature and so on. That partly comes from my anatomy studies, less so than drawing from life. Instead of drawing from life, where you might approach that differently, even from drawings, from studies of human figures, where you might be finding the gesture, but also like measurements and like shapes and angles on things in terms of the silhouette and in terms of the outer edge of things, let's say. This is different. It's get the gesture, and then build and construct on top of it, as if creating it out of thin air. But I had done quite a bit of that. I haven't lately, but I did quite a bit of that studying from anatomy, and I think that influenced me to approach things more dynamically. So that's just that's what feels right as I'm drawing this gesture of her running. That's how it came out. All right. So again, there's a lot of figures on the ground. I'm referencing old pages and trying to see where are people laying, where are they in space, and it was never perfectly accurate. So I'm continuing to have issues there, like with maintaining consistency, but it also isn't super important that everything's the same exact size and position. People know what these things are. It'll be conveyed well enough. Now we have some tall panels. We're going to see down into the bottom of the well, which disappears at the bottom of this long panel. The soldiers are just falling straight down into it. They're falling down the panel, but also on the z-axis, like away from us, down into the well. And then we have, Sun at the top of it where he had just finished shoving or hitting them. I'm trying to figure out things like, how much detail should be on the ground above them, the challenge of the perspective on that, and how much I want to bend that reality, because this is somewhat bent from reality. But remember, these tiles are radiating out, so I've got a kind of problem here where I can't have things vanishing away into the background towards the vanishing point, because they're actually growing out from a radial, center. That is, and I of course I can have them shrink away, but my point is that in terms of composition and design of the panel, it goes against the energy that I might be trying to get. So trying to play with that and get it to look nice, and yet have some sense of reality to it. So you'll see that the tiles above him just flow straight down into the well towards him. And then I have to deal with, how much perspective to put on these figures, and are they, if they look smaller than him, well, he can't look too big. He's just a kid. So do I, make sure their legs are growing more as they come up towards us? And I'm drawing them upside down, which is more challenging too, to draw figures upside down. But it's getting easier for me. I just go with it because, again, I draw pretty constructively, so I just put the pieces together. Doesn't really matter what position they're in. And you see I'm making lots of adjustments here to my original sketch. It's like, okay, should I shorten this more? What position should I put the head, the hands in precisely where it looks better? Originally, I planned on them being smaller and sun being smaller in this panel. But as I drew it out, I realized like they're the main focus, the figures. Like you're not seeing enough of the curve of the well or down into it. You're not seeing enough of those elements for them to be the prominent thing. So I went with the figures being very clear and prominent. And it's for balance. He was smaller. They were smaller in the last panel. So now let's get a little more of a medium, shot on them, or medium size. Okay. This one is a really complicated shot, and I definitely cheated it when it comes to the perspective. But what I wanted was, as I sensed, this circle of the well and the well at the bottom, I wanted to just use this large panel to put sun in the foreground on the bottom left, a large circle for his head in that space as he's turning, and then show Farah approaching sword. So I loosely scribbled each of these figures in where I wanted them to be positioned. I didn't draw the environment first. I first positioned the core elements, the key elements I wanted, and their size to each other and position. And then I built the background based on those positions. And it turned out in this case that their positions were not greatly realistic for what I was able to do with the background. Like their size and position is bending reality a bit. So I'm trying to do that in the panel. Now, there is a way that you can do that in a more believable way, because when we look at this image, our eye is going to have to travel. It's a pretty large panel. Your eye is going to travel, from maybe the top down towards the bottom. And as your eye moves across the page, the perspective could warp. It could change as you move down, almost like a camera is tilting down towards sun, or that it's a fisheye lens, this kind of warping. As long as there's some kind of consistency to that warping and a consistency at each, kind of grouping along your eye path, let's say, it will read as believable. So that's happening a bit here because we have sun in the foreground, and it's almost like the horizon line has moved down lower, and things are growing more towards the camera, like the camera's closer. It's a wider angle lens, that's getting some distortion here, we could say. That's because I want sun to be big, but I also want to separate the figures in the background. See, if sun was in the foreground really big, then you would want him on a z-axis very in line with the other two figures. But then his head would move up the page. He would fill the page, and then you would see kind of level with him, sword sitting there, and then level and behind him, partly covered up by him perhaps, Farah running. They would be directly in line, overlapping. I wanted them spaced out visually like this, and I wanted sun to be that large. So I was setting myself up for a very challenging situation, because I was going to need to cheat reality to do it. And how much can I cheat it? And I actually started with a much larger sun here, and I kept reducing his size, and I slightly adjusted the position of these circular, the stones in the circle and things. I I adjusted things here and there until I pressed them into place, made it, massaged it in where it'll work. And it required, compromising a bit on my original plan. And then accepting the imperfect, that it's definitely not totally accurate, but it reads. I used to struggle with drawing people the same every time, and that has gotten a lot easier, and maybe it has to do with this more constructive drawing I've done. But as I draw sword sitting on the ground there, I could have done that much more quickly if I'd approached it as just simple blocky shapes. But because I'm building out his form, it's going to take longer, but it's also, there's more detail, there's more accuracy to the position of different muscle groups and in the shoulder blade and so on. It brings it to life more. There's benefits to it. But also, doing that, I naturally sort of build towards the amount of mass this person should have. When he looks like he's 200 pounds of muscle, like you can see it. Like as you're drawing it, as I'm drawing it, I get the feeling of building it out. And then I'm like, oh, he still looks, he looks like he might be 180 pounds here. Like I need to add a little bit more thickness and in muscle and so on. Because I'm starting kind of from the skeleton and constructing out, I can just add a little more until I get the right sized person. So I've gotten, that has helped me get more consistent in drawing people the same. And little anatomy details that I've gotten a little better at, like the knee and other features in the leg. When you need to draw people in very dynamic positions with foreshortening and so on, sometimes you don't have a lot of details to convey what something is. You don't have a lot of space or lines to convey what it is. And so if you can get like just a nice curve near the ankle and the heel and the foot, if you can get just little details in the knee, it'll convey what that is. It'll give things clarity. And it isn't necessarily more lines. I mean, sometimes it is, but your finished work doesn't need necessarily more lines. It's just the position of your lines and shadow will be more informed by structure. And it'll be more clear what they are. And so you can get away with more. In the past, when maybe I would want to draw, you might want to draw, so let's say someone's holding, I was thinking of this because it's a kind of a common situation. Someone's holding a pistol, a handgun in front of them. And so you might draw their shoulders, their chest, their head, their hands up. And you might want to draw it at such an angle where you capture a lot of the arm and the length of it, that it's not pointed too much at the camera. You would want to frame it more like that so that it's easier to convey everything. But now imagine you zoom in so much that all you're seeing is a little bit of one finger or two. That you crop your panel down to where you've only got a finger or two showing. And you have to convey that here's the pistol, but there's a little bit of shoulder showing on one side, and his head or hers, here. You've got you have a lot less. You can't show the full piece of the anatomy in its most clear angle to convey what it is. You have to be able to do it with very little. And that gives you a wider range of expression. You can always do it the easy way, but you are not so free to express yourself through the medium when you have to do it that way. And you'll be encumbered and you'll become repetitive, and you're just not going to be a master of your craft. You're not going to be able to communicate freely. Yeah, not unlike I guess you could say a writer who has a limited vocabulary for colors or emotions or things in nature, and then different terms for it. They're going to struggle to convey these, let's say the physical space in a fantasy book. They're fighting and it's in the woods, the rocky region or whatever. How do you describe all those elements if you don't know those terms, like a crag? And if the reader doesn't know what they are either, but you need to know to be more free and clear in your expression. So that's been something I continually develop in. And for me, it is not about tricks. I do not learn tricks. Like, I don't have a reference for a bent leg. Like here, both Sun and Farah, we see their leg bent towards the camera. It's not like I've learned tricks for how to convey that, and then I just do the tricks every time. I'm actually learning how to draw. It takes longer, and it means it's going to look worse for longer. You have to embrace it looking worse longer, because you're not looking for a shortcut. You're going to actually understand that form and how to move it around in space and look at it from different angles. And you're going to do your best to convey that each time, and it will get more and more masterful as you go. And that has been great, because I remember I used to I just dropped some ink on the page there. My pen, I'm not going to get into it, but sometimes I have troubles with the pen and the angle of how vertical my board is and stuff, or the ink being too dry, and then I get too much on the pen. But I look at work that I admire from great artists now, but I can see, I see their solutions to certain problems, conveying certain things at certain angles and so on, whether that be the shapes, the line work, or if it's like the inking and feathering and shading techniques that are used. But I can look at those in comics now, and I can see through it. Like I used to look, even as a kid, looking at like Jim Lee comics, and I would just be like, oh my God, how is this done? But now I can look at it and go, oh yeah, I see what he's trying to do there. I see what he's trying to communicate, and even how it's incorrect, how it's not, it's one solution. It's not the thing in itself. It's not like how anatomy actually works. It's one solution to it. And I can see, I have an understanding of it in relationship to reality as a solution, as a technique, versus just being kind of wowed by it, just kind of in awe of it and wanting to emulate it without knowledge, wanting to emulate Mike Mignola's shadows and forms without knowledge of how these things are constructed. Not enough knowledge. And you do both, you emulate and you admire, and you also, hopefully you're doing both. And you also learn more about, along the way, you learn the truth of things. But you do have to be careful with not learning enough about reality and the why and how of how things work, so that you can convey masterfully that, you're not just a poet that's trying to make nice poetry that isn't communicating anything. It's just sort of copying the cool, pacing and intonation and, sounds of other poets. Like, you have to be saying something. So I know there's comics that can look pretty, but sometimes I almost feel queasy looking at them when an example, and this is a stylistic choice that I also like. An example would be when you cast light from a window onto a wall, and you angle the light because it looks cooler that way. But light never enters a window angled like that. If you have, the vertical cut window, the light's coming in at an angle, but it's going to cast a perfectly vertical, chunk of light onto the wall. And but that's often not drawn that way because it's boring and it's kind of confusing because it looks like it's there, it's part of the environment, as if it's a cutout in the wall instead of something that doesn't belong there, something on a separate layer of reality, light and shadow, let's say. So there's reasons to do it, and it can look cool, but that's an example of like too much of that kind of thing, and it can just look like it's not really real, like it's not an environment. It's just nice designs that look nice, maybe, but doesn't feel like an actual environment. It's kind of like a comic where you never see people's feet touch the ground. If everything's a close-up, a medium shot, cowboy shot, where you see a bit of the hips where they might have their pistols, right? But if everything's like that, then it can make you feel uneasy, like these people aren't really here. They're not. I'm not in touch with the environment and the person in their world. It has no impact. And it's the same if you never do close-ups of faces and show emotions. If your faces don't have detail, for example, a stylistic choice of the way you do faces, or even a hyperrealism choice, there can be ways in which it won't have impact. It doesn't feel like it's conveying anything. But yeah, it goes both ways. But you want to, consider that. Learn how things work and try to construct environments. Not only use tricks or design principles to guide the eye through the story, and only look at the figures, let's say. It's really cool when there's artists that do that. They have great design. They guide the eye through the book, and you can tell what's important. There's this figure, and then the object they're interacting with, or the other person, and you just see those things conveyed. But when that's the only thing that you see, or those are the only elements that feel substantial, real, lived in contact with each other, then there's no environment. This takes place nowhere. It really doesn't have much of an impact at that point. And you may still enjoy it, and I've enjoyed comics like that, but at the same time, you might enjoy it for a different reason. This might not be to its credit. At least for me, that's how I see it. So I insist on constructing figures and environments and putting them in relationship to each other, impacting each other in my stories. And that means a lot of work. It means learning to be fast. Let things look incorrect to some degree, loose, wobbly, sketchy, rough, incorrect at times. Like, you're going to have to do a lot of that just to get it done in a timely fashion. And, anyways, there's me building out these inks that I did just the other day. You'll see kind of starting at the top left, working my way down so that I don't rub ink around. Even though I'm going to go through with the brush pen and add more blacks, I am doing them in a basic fashion now, knowing that I can thicken lines with the brush, add lines, block things in, such as the shadow, like the bottom of the left panel here is going to be just in black, just in darkness at the bottom of the well. But I didn't bother, I didn't do that with the nib. I'm going to do that with the brush. And sometimes I'm, filling in an area in solid black, and sometimes it's left see-through, you could say, through these kind of parallel lines, these hatching lines that I use with the nib, or with the brush sometimes too, if I thicken them out with the brush. And that is done in terms of feel, in terms of where should there be the greatest contrast, the greatest weight, because adding the black on white is going to add a lot of weight, but also leaving it open is going to add interest visually, detail. Anyways. Yeah, so what did I start off talking about in this video? I might come back to that. The principles that I'm trying to go by of what's the important thing in being my practice. And I think I should write these out. The principles are not shoulds. They're not things you should do. They're not rules. They're principles. This is what I do, and this is what I don't do. And I agree to that because it's in my best interest in the long term, and I'm going to submit to that and not stray from that path. It takes, that is wise. That's wise to do. It's fun when you stay undefined and you just chase whatever next inspiration or shiny object there is. You can feel like maybe you're growing more quickly in that time. But that is not how it works in reality. When you look at anything people do to get really good at it, there is such a thing as cross training, and there is such a thing as being thrown into the deep end and challenged, and gaining, you gain quickly sometimes in those scenarios, but no one becomes a top level in their field by doing that. You have to do highly focused, specific stuff. You have to have consistency in how you're approaching it and what you choose to do that's important or not. That enjoyment of just trying something new, that's like a bit of a fantasy. Like, it would be nice. It's almost like you would want this perfect mentor that just throws things at you, but it's because they have the bigger picture in mind. They're going to help you get to that end point, and you can trust them with that, and you just get to show up to school and just have total faith in them that they're guiding you in the right direction. That does not exist in reality. Like, most of the time, that's not going to exist in life. You will have to decide. You will have to be your own mentor. Yes, you should find mentors. You should find relationships with others, but you can't just give it all over to them and just let them take care of all the responsibility of your decisions. You will have to do that. You will be responsible for what kind of artist you become, and how far you go with it, and how well it's integrated into your life, or how much it is an escape, a fantasy or something. How enjoyable it is for you, how much monetary success you have, or whatever. It'll all be on you in the end. And we don't want that. We want some kind of out. but it's worth it. Don't give up. It's just better to be honest with those things. And and then you can do something about it. That's why I'm an advocate for getting clear about what you're doing, getting clear on the principles, paying attention to your development, and making sense of what is authentic to your journey versus something you just picked up or are trying to do for some other reason. What are your reasons for doing it? That's better, I think. And I'm at the point now, I would rather go a month without drawing a page, or drawing even, than draw every day from the wrong mindset. That when I do it, I've got to do it right. That's the important thing for the long-term goal. And there's, don't worry, there's still sacrifice involved. You go down this path, you're still going to sacrifice. And it takes a lot of discipline too. Here is the finished page. You'll see there's highlights and shadows applied on a separate layer from the flat colors. That helps me bring interest and focus to certain areas. I want to make sure that these figures pop off the background, so I've put highlights on them. They're quite bright, so it's not so much the shadows I might just apply to one blob of area, but the highlights really are just little pops of highlight. I can't put everything that's in the light with this layer of light added. I got to be careful with that because it doesn't serve the purpose as a highlight if it's used as like a midtone or something. So here on Sword's back, there's quite a bit of the light applied, but that was in contrast to his left side. It helped him pop. And then on Sun, you'll see there's just an edge to him that's brighter. And sometimes I use it to create more contrast. So the entire lead she's on is brightened up because the flat colors I use don't have that much color value variation. But I needed it to pop off the background. And down in the well, I used a slightly more blue shade that is in my palette because that'll help it stand out rather than using value, making it very light or very dark. I wanted to use color to help separate in this case. But there it is, another page also with no words. I am enjoying not putting a lot of words in when I don't have to. In some intense moments, it feels like it detracts from it. The words help readers connect with the thoughts and the will, sort of the mind of these characters and how they're interacting. But if you can convey it without words, without using words, it is still good. Words are, in that sense, low-hanging fruit. It's easier to do it with words. But if you can do it through the visuals, through showing, then it works just the same. And there's a case to be made to use both because they can complement each other, but they don't always complement each other. Sometimes they will detract. And that is it for this week. I hope you got something out of this. I do this every week, and I will see you at the next one. These come out on Sundays. Bye.